the latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. The African is still not yet free. So are we supposed to follow Captain Ibrahim Traore, or we need to continue to be doing our own things, expecting different results? Captain Ibrahim Traore came into office and he's bringing a lot on the table, uniting the Africans and always preaching that we have to have a revolution, and in order to set ourselves free, we need to unite and fight against that political independence that was given to us in the name of independence, because the African is still not independent. Like Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said, political independence is meaningless without economic independence. So he came into office and he's fighting, doing everything possible to change the narrative in Ouagadougou. And we are seeing all the beautiful things that he's doing day in, day out. So now we are asking if we need to follow his approach, or maybe we just have to continue to be doing the same things that we are having in Africa here. Like our brother who spoke from Kenya said, when it comes to Captain Ibrahim Traore, he is on a national project, doing everything possible to make sure that the whole nation changes. But unlike what we are seeing in Kenya and the rest of the African countries, those who are practicing democracy, doing all that they are doing is to still police other people, and that is why their wishes are what we always see happen. Like what recently happened in Benin, where Tinubu, with all the banditry, all the things, the kidnapping that is happening in Nigeria, Tinubu has to put it aside and make France enemy his enemy. How can your brother be an enemy to France and you still want to make your brother an enemy? Simple because France is somebody who came here and oppress you and still want to have upper hand in your brother's country.
We've got a terrific panel to talk that through. Investigative journalist David Hundean, General Secretary of the Communist Party Marxist Kenya, Buka Omole, and CEO of Strategy Consulting Group East Africa, Giza Ronald Leonard. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. David, can we kick off with you? Would you agree that Mr. Traore, what he's saying is an example that other African nations should follow? Is that something that they should take on board and get on board with?
I think it's quite self-explanatory, really, because the core of his message is that this continent is not yet free, which is an evident reality. It's not economically or politically free yet. The independence that we assumed in the 1960s was a sort of managed independence, a neo-colonial independence, and we've seen the results across the continent, and perhaps nowhere as stark as in the Sahel. So if anyone would know what he's talking about with regard to the need to decolonize and the need to achieve true sovereignty, it would be Ibrahim Traore or his comrades from the Sahel. So yes, absolutely. African countries, any African countries looking at the situation, even in Burkina Faso alone, from 2022, when he came into power till now, it's estimated that the Burkinabe economy has grown cumulatively by 43%. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think there's another country on the continent that has recorded economic performance like that over the same period. So clearly, he's doing something right. And clearly, the push for sovereignty is not just sloganeering, it's not just rhetoric that sounds nice and revolutionary, but it's something that is backed up by action on the ground and is having a genuine economic effect on the ground. There's an infrastructure boom going on. The country's GDP is expanding. People's lives are objectively getting better. So with, from those parameters, it's very easy to draw the conclusion that definitely the rest of Africa, even if they're not paying attention yet, will be paying attention very soon.
Buka Omole, what do you think? Should your nation, Kenya, should it do what Ouagadougou has done, or is that a stretch too far?
First of all, it's important to recognize that Ouagadougou and now Nairobi, there is a difference in administration that are sitting in Nairobi and Ouagadougou. The Ouagadougou is actually implementing the national project. This is important, that they are moving from a neo-colonial regime to an independent regime that can implement policies that are pro-people, not policies that are dictated from Washington or Brussels. And that is why the Kenyan people and the entire African people supports the Ouagadougou project. It's important for us to analyze that because many of the African countries that are still living under the dictates of the West have not achieved real independence. In fact, today, as we reflect about the Kenyan Independence Day, the Jamhuri Day tomorrow, we admire the events on the Sahel region, and particularly the amount of development that has taken place led by the Ouagadougou government. This is important for us because even in our own analysis, we are saying that a majority of the African countries, Nairobi as the capital city and what we call the epicenter of finance capital, cannot pretend to represent interest of the Kenyan people. But what we see in the Sahel region, we see a government that have achieved what we call the National Democratic Revolution. That means an anti-imperialist government, that which puts the interest of their people at the center of it. So we support fully the project in Ouagadougou from the African perspective.
Agisa, I have the sense from afar that there was a lot of pressure on Captain Traoré. If his efforts had failed dramatically, that could have put an end to similar issues in the region. But he hasn't. As David has said, he's laid out what's happened over the past 3 years, which appears to be largely positive. Is this good for African unity and progress? Is this something that can be a template?
We are not short of people who are of the same school of thought with the leadership in Burkina Faso. Africa has had elites who have espoused the beliefs in this kind of leadership. However, they have always had, bumps along the way and reality checks. What has been happening is that when revolutionaries come up or leaders rise up on the African continent with this kind of, walking down this path, they have been assassinated or they have been killed under suspicious circumstances. It is very interesting that we are actually talking about Burkina Faso. This is the country which gave us Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara is a hero to many African people all over the continent. Go to the farthest end of Africa, you will find people who believe in, in what the gospel of Thomas Sankara. He was somebody who preached against neocolonialism. But what happened? They got, the Western world just worked with greedy people from within, and then you had the camp of Blaise Compaoré, the former president of Burkina Faso, to assassinate Thomas Sankara. So, from a risk perspective, what Captain Traoré has started doing, he is facing one major risk. If he can stave off assassinations or infiltration and internal sabotage from within, that would throw the whole government into disarray by maybe attempts to eliminate him and this kind of things. We have seen he's not actually the first person to do that. We had President John Pombe Magufuli of Tanzania. He had also started on a similar agenda. Albeit he went about it in a mild manner, but you found that he also died under unclear circumstances during the COVID pandemic. So what I'm trying to show you is that the neo-colonialists are not sitting back. So they are trying to infiltrate and win over some saboteurs from within that might help them to put brakes on this revolutionary path that is being taken by Captain Traoré and others. Yes.
David, his words today, Captain Traoré, or during the week, will not have gone unnoticed by the likes of ECOWAS and their backers in the West as well. How are relations between that West African grouping and the Alliance of Sahel States? Are they rubbing ferociously, or are they just about getting along?
To be fair, it will be impossible to say that relations are good right now. They're simply objectively not. And that's not the doing of the AES or of Burkina Faso. That's solely the doing of ECOWAS. This unnecessary hostility between both blocs began in 2023 after Niger's revolutionary coup, when ECOWAS then made that incredible decision to try and stage a military invasion of Niger using the Nigerian military, which thankfully didn't happen at the time. But since that time, there's definitely been a very deep schism. And then to add to that, the fact that in addition to threatening military actions in Niger, Nigeria took certain unilateral decisions, such as cutting off electricity supply to Niger. The context there is that Niger and Nigeria both share the Niger River. And there's a treaty that was signed in 1966, which made it such that in exchange for Niger not damming its portion of the Niger River, Nigeria had to supply electricity to Niger. Now, in the name of protecting democracy, Nigeria then goes and unilaterally shuts off electricity to the capital, Niamey, which resulted in actual deaths. The babies in incubators who died. So these things definitely caused some tensions. And then more recently, obviously, we've seen what happened in Benin, even though obviously the AES was not involved in that project, but the assumption was that since this purportedly was an anti-imperialist coup, then that automatically means that there is some assumed tension between the two. And then to then add to that, more recently, a Nigerian Air Force Hercules C-130 a military transport aircraft was forced to land in Burkina Faso. Supposedly, the aircraft was on a ferry flight to Portugal, but the Portuguese government has apparently disclaimed it and said there was no such thing. And it's still unclear what exactly a Nigerian military aircraft was doing in Burkinabe airspace without obtaining the necessary overflight permission. And there are currently 11 Nigerian soldiers who are detained in Ouagadougou. So I think right now tensions are probably at the highest that they've ever been. And as I said before, that's not the doing of the AES. That's entirely the doing of ECOWAS, which has decided to adopt a very militaristic position toward the AES. The AES, for reference, has actually maintained an open border policy with ECOWAS. It has said that if you have an ECOWAS passport, you're still free to enter the AES without a visa, as before when they used to be part of ECOWAS. So clearly they have presented the olive branch, and it's ECOWAS that has chosen to rebuff it.
Booker, some analysts will say the neo-colonialist issue is overblown. In your experience, do you think that's the case, or is it one of the biggest issues on the continent right now?
Well, you can't even call it a neo-colonialist.
That's just to Booker, sorry.
First of all, it's important to note that the African continent continued to be propagandized to accept the neo-colonial regimes or the puppets of Washington and Brussels as their true leaders. This is important. It is a case of call a dog a bad name or call a cat a bad name to kill it. Every person that have stood in the interest of the African continent and their country have been either called a terrorist, they have been badmouthed, and eventually murdered, from all to the most recent one, which was Gaddafi. So it's important to acknowledge that the events that are taking place in Burkina Faso and the entire Sahel region is to demonstrate that the African countries can stand against the arrogance of the West and the dictates of particularly the United States imperialism.
Okay.
It is nothing that is overblown. Remember when this coup started, it is the same United States Washington War Consensus that came to declare these coups undemocratic. While they have been supporting coups in Africa, but for coups that are popular, that are actually dislodging their puppets in the African continent, they then badmouth those coups. But for us, we want to take an early lead by saying that the era of the United States dictates and the neoliberal policy that is imposed against the African continent, it is over. And the United States...
I just want to fit in Agisa for the last 40 seconds. We're under a little bit of time pressure. Agisa, what is the biggest issue stopping true independence on the continent in your view?
It's interference from the West. Of course, now the path that has been taken by Burkina Faso and other members in the Sahel region can be strengthened if African countries can go into strong alliances with other superpowers so that they can neuter or neutralize the effect of the West, because the West has been having a field day in the African continent when it comes to strategic security and of course the control of political power. So if we go into strategic alliances with other members that have veto power on the UN Security Council, that of course will help, with the power play. That is something that African nations need to look at.
So we as Africans need to understand that we are still not free, and if truly we want our freedom, it is you and I that need to come together to fight for that freedom. And what Captain Ibrahim Traore is doing is the right thing that we need to do, because we are seeing the projects, the development, and the things that he's doing in Burkina Faso. This is not a leader who came into office thinking about how to enrich himself, like the politicians that we have in our respective countries who claim they are there to serve us. But at the end of the day, we see that within 4, 3, 5 years that they are in office, they become billionaires, millionaires. Somebody who has nothing becomes rich overnight. And these are not the things that we are seeing happening in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. These are the people in the democratic elected who go for loans, and at the end of the day, even though we are going to be paying, the generations to come will pay, we still don't see anything significant that these people are using the money for. But Captain Ibrahim Traore is on an agenda to fight for generations and not today, because according to Captain Ibrahim Traore, if we don't do anything today to change the narrative, our generations to come, the children, will ask us what we have done in order to save this continent. And you and I must understand that what we are doing today isn't for you and I, but for the generations to come. And that is Captain Ibrahim Traore's main motive. And we should know as Africans that we have a responsibility to make sure that the generations that will come will not go through what we are going through. So we have to follow the footsteps of Captain Ibrahim Traore. Look at how their economies are booming. Look at how things are changing. Look at the things that they said when they took office, that they wouldn't go anywhere, they can't survive, they will suffer, they will do this. But at the end of the day, we have proved them wrong. And look at how ECOWAS and African Union are rather behaving towards them. Instead of supporting their brothers who are on the right path to freedom, they are rather against them, simply because it doesn't please other people. And those in the democratic elected have all washed their hands because they still want to be in bed with their colonizers, and they always want to do the bid of other people. Like the rightful told us, AES told us that ECOWAS is not serving the interests of the people. African Union is an organization, by name it exists, but this union isn't doing anything significant for its own people. And we are seeing the African Union isn't actually serving our interests. If not, we have decided that we love Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso leaders, because we have seen that they are rather doing the right thing that we are looking for as citizens. The democratic elected leaders, all that they are good at is to be robbing the nation, because we don't see anything good that they are doing. People that will just construct 100 kilometers of road, and if they have used just, let's say, $1, will not come out and tell us they have used $10. These are not people who are patriotic, but these are the people who makes up the African Union that claims that always they are looking for a solution to the African problem. But now that we have the solution, they are the same people who are rising against that same solution. So the best thing that we need today isn't us continuing to follow the system of the oppressor, because this system failed us, and the system will never help you, the African. The systems are designed to make sure you, the African, can continue to be obedient to them. And this is why those leaders in the democratic elected that they are not going after, and we claim we have peace, we have this, is because we are obedient. We are always saying yes to them and not resisting to fight for our own sovereignty. And until we resist, we can never get anywhere. And that is why we've seen that our freedom fighters at a point in time resisted, and they fought for us to have this so-called independence that we have. They go to a point, and it is you and I, our responsibility to make sure that we end what they have started. We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make African great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world and in Africa.